put up the screen. Hello. All right. We are live. And we've got 3 people watching us, Mauro.
Oh, it's awesome. 3 to get started. That's all I can say.
That's 3 more than I expected. Hey, Derek. If you want to jump in and be part of the video chat, you just let me know in the comments and I'll send you the link that you can join us at. So here's, for those who don't know, joining me on screen here is Mauro. Mauro and I have been doing a thing on Friday nights together on a live stream. This is a little different. Normally what we're going to be doing on Fridays is, it's not a technical thing, it's about cybersecurity, but it's about the profession and leadership and issues. Tonight, for fun, I thought I would do something technical. I was starting to put together a technical, like a pre-recorded video on what I learned about DevOps and how I used it to automate the build of my Windows desktop. And then I thought, oh man, pre-recording this is more work. Okay, you know what? Just do it. Just go online. It's just show and tell. Put together some notes and do it. So here we are. And just like with what we've been doing, Mauro, I'm thinking I probably do this every Tuesday. I can handle 2 live streams in a week.
You're addicted. And you're addicted.
I am currently addicted to. For 5 years, I have been talking about pre-recording. I do tons of talks, pre-recording them, putting them online, and I never do it. And man, this is just an easy alternative, and it's just as good, and it fulfills my deep-seated need to share everything I learn, and learn by pushing myself to share. Let me give you the backstory. So back in November, December, I quit my job, and I took some time off, and as I always do between jobs, I did a lot of professional development and things that I never got to get deep into before. So I took a ton of online classes in DevOps and data science. I dove in on Python and PowerShell and a bunch of other things. And when I was studying DevOps, I started thinking, I'm doing this wrong on my desktop. And I mean, not as a developer. So this is not DevOps continuous integration pipeline for the purposes of making an application on the internet stay live all the time. This is, I just want to deploy software automatically on my desktop. I don't want it cluttered as I install dozens and dozens of development tools. I had 3 different Python developments. So I thought, oh, you know what? I want some containers and I want some automation. And I had already been talking previously with friends and clients about, we need a way to automate the installation, removal, and upgrade of software on Windows desktops. And it's got to not cost $35 per desktop per year. Some of the enterprise solutions are great. So I hunted around, and there are solutions out there, and I settled for one called Choco, or Chocolatey Package Manager, and that allowed me to automate the build of my PC. So I actually reformatted my PC, just installed Windows, and then didn't manually install any software. I used the package manager and scripting to install everything after that. And then I realized, oh, I don't even want half the packages in there. I want to do those in VMs. And oh no, I don't want VMs. I want to do this the right way. I want to use Docker. And I was learning DevOps, so I thought, oh, this is the right time to experiment. And now, other than the stuff I install to do like streaming and media creation, most of it lives in a Docker container. And so I'm going to show you these little bits and pieces. And there's nothing dramatic here. And there's nothing you can't find in a million other how-tos. I'm just going to show you my story and give you my examples. And you can see firsthand and ask me questions. And I hope maybe there's someone out there who's done something differently and can help me address some of the challenges I faced. So there we go. Let me switch. All right. So I wrote up some notes, and I'm going to put these in a LinkedIn article after this. And I'll put the link to that article in the comment section after this live stream is done. So here's what I'm using. Chocolatey Package Manager. And if you want the address of there, it's shown on the bottom of the screen. So this is a PowerShell integrated framework for doing Windows Package Manager, or package management. Now I'm going to describe a little bit more about why PowerShell is important and why a proper package manager is important as well. The second thing is Docker Desktop for Windows. So most people talk about Docker on Linux, Docker in the cloud. This is different. So this is a virtual machine that contains the Docker engine running in Hyper-V on Windows 10, and then a command line interface that allows me to build, provision, and interact with containers, which are in fact all Linux. And that's super helpful. I no longer have a separate Linux environment that I have to flip into, or a separate laptop. It's just Linux. And then the last part, which I haven't completed yet, is to use something called Vagrant, another part of the whole DevOps tool set. Vagrant allows you to automate the build, deployment, and configuration of virtual machines. And normally that would be, say, like VirtualBox. But because Docker Desktop for Windows needs Hyper-V, I've already got a VM system, and I was thinking, and I haven't done this yet, I was thinking, you know what, I'm going to get Vagrant for those times when I still want a VM. Say I want some kind of interaction that's not really easily supported out of Docker. I could then still automate that, so and have a generic VM suddenly get deployed, but then configured, install some packages, launch a process, all those kinds of things that I don't want to have to manually interact with. Save me a ton of time and make a lot of my experiments reproducible. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is talk about Chocolatey Package Manager. And let me bring this guy up on the screen. So installing this thing is actually super easy. And let me just go over how it works. So it's open source, and there's a free version. But there's also an enterprise or business version. I'm actually running the licensed pro version. So they send me a license key and it unlocks a few extra features. When I started this just a few months ago, there were far fewer features. And the one that I really cared about is this, PowerShell functions. And I got the pro version so that I could get pretty much full PowerShell interactivity. When I demo it, you're going to understand the difference between doing this the free way, which is with command.exe batch commands, which is perfectly fine. You can still script that. You can still automate that. But PowerShell is really amazing, especially its object-oriented pipeline. I'm a Unix guy going way back, 25 years or more, and I always loved Bash, Z shell, and K shell, and anything I could do a pipeline in. PowerShell's pipelining is better and more powerful. A little bit more tricky to script. So all you do is you download this thing and install it. And there's not much else in its basic usage. And once you've got it installed, we'll run a command window. And I'm going to run this as administrator because this is a package manager. Just like any software package you install, you're going to need elevated privileges. And let me just bump up my font here just a smidge to make this a little more readable for everybody. So the basic command is called Choco, short for chocolatey. And we can say Choco search, and let's search for something that we might want to use, Notepad++. And now it's going to go out to a cloud repository, and it's going to say, oh, yeah, we've got a whole bunch of packages. Now, this is the one we would normally install. These are for special purposes. Often you'll see multiple packages, especially install. I'm not going to cover that here. You can read about that separately. The point is, you go and you search for stuff, and there's a lot of stuff out there. Let's look for Voicemeeter. Voicemeeter is a virtual audio pipeline on Windows. And you know what? Other than people who are streaming to like YouTube or Twitch, who would use that? Voiceover artists? Oh, but look, it's actually in the repository. It knows about a lot of software packages. There are some that I've encountered that I needed that weren't in there, but it knows most. Now, if I want to install something, and I'm not going to install Voicemeeter, because you know what it's going to do? It's going to cut out my audio. Let's install Kitty, which is an alternative to Putty for SSH. Good cybersecurity program. It's got some advanced features that Putty doesn't have. See if it's available. And there it is. Both Kitty and the portable version. Oh, and it's also suggesting to me Super Putty. I don't know why, but that's actually relevant. So now it's as simple as Choco install Kitty. And you know what? Normally it's going to prompt me for stuff, but we don't want that. We want to automate. So I'm actually going to say Choco install Kitty with a -y, and it's saying, look, we're just going to do a silent install. You could put this in a batch script, and away you go. And what's really interesting about Kitty as an example is there is a special script that has to run post-install, and you'll see that that actually occurs. So something that I would normally have to do manually, again, is automated, and I didn't have to automate it. The package producer who made that Choco package decided that. Now, if I want to get rid of something, well, let's do an upgrade example first. If I wanted to upgrade it, upgrade Kitty. And it should come back and say, no, 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 you already have the current version. Yeah, you're on the latest version available. And now let's uninstall Kitty. In the business version, you can actually control this, I think it's through group policy or scripting, but you can centrally control it. And so the idea is, if you've got Ivanti or Shablik or Qualys or one of these other package managers that's really good, well, you're getting a full-blown enterprise architecture, inventorying, GUI for management, and that's great, but it costs money. If this is for a single standalone thing that's not an Active Directory, or if it's a small business or a medium enterprise, and you just don't feel like $50 a year per desktop is worth it, you can get it all done this way. And I've known a few clients where we had a real big mess where we had all these uncontrolled desktops, maybe dozens or hundreds. They didn't want to explore getting an enterprise system, but when I went and did a security audit, I was like, well, one of my major findings is all the desktop software is vulnerable. They're patching their OS through WSUS, but they have no way to update their desktop software. Well, this would be a dream. Piece of cake. Okay. That is using DOS commands, but I don't want to use DOS commands. I want to use PowerShell so that I can make, say, a text file or a CSV file that contains all the packages I want on my computer. And anytime I want to update or install something, it's done through there. And I've got some PowerShell commands that would take care of that for me. And there are some extra steps to do that, but they're not all that hard. And once you've got this is really cool, because then you can use the PowerShell commands to go out and use Windows remoting to securely inventory all of your machines, figure out if there's new versions available, give you reports, go look for specific versions that might be vulnerable, and then, of course, to actually perform upgrades on them or silent installs. Now, let me show you some of these commands, and I'm just going to move this window off screen so I can see it while I type. So I'm going to close this ancient DOS window because it's not 1988 anymore. And we're going to go over to this window. Now, this is running as administrator because, again, package manager, we need to. And let's do this. So the reason why PowerShell integration is really important is because Windows PowerShell has a package manager system already built in, and it's based on this thing called NuGet or NuGet. And you'll see what I just did is said find package providers, and it's saying, oh, look at all of these things that have been installed that are here that can go out and get packages, fetch them off the internet, and then install them. This is not to say they're active. This is not to say that they're trusted. It's just saying these, my PowerShell environment knows. And what's really cool is I didn't realize this is how Docker does its provisioning as well. Microsoft Office using the same thing. And then we've got Chocolatey. So if we want to see which package providers are currently active, type in this PowerShell commandlet, and boom, it says, look, you've got PowerShell Gallery, and you've got Chocolatey. And this is a way to get other PowerShell modules installed. Now, if I wanted to, if I didn't already have speaking of manual, I accidentally launched my video editor. We're just going to wait for that to start, and then I'll close it. Now, suppose Chocolatey wasn't already an active package manager, well, I've got a commandlet that says Choco. I can never spell this. I can say, make it active, and then it adds that list. And then a really important thing is, if you try to install packages after this, well, they're not going to be trusted. They're not a trusted repository. And if you try to install anything that requires privilege, it's going to suddenly go, whoa, 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 that's not safe. So we can then say, okay, this is trusted. Then, now earlier I used the DOS command choco search. Well, in PowerShell, I can say find package. And if I give it no arguments, it's going to go off and list every package that is in that repository. Or I could say, and now it shows me every package that matches the word notepad. And so, favorite editors are all in there. And if I want to see which packages are installed on this machine, in true PowerShell fashion, that's the get command, get package. And so you can see these are all the things that I have installed. And because of the Pro version, it actually synchronizes packages that were installed manually, which will, the ones that say MSU, those were things I didn't install. The ones that say programs, well, those are ones that Chocolatey installed. And also in true PowerShell fashion, there are additional properties and attributes of each one of these that we can fetch. So we can say, write a PowerShell command that says, you know what, go and get me the versions and the names, and then put those into an object. And then I can pipe that into a script that says, well, also compare it to the version that's available. And if the version that's available is greater than the version that's installed, then give me a list of all the things that could be upgraded. Or I could say, go out and find me Notepad++ on all my computers in my environment where the version is some version number that's vulnerable. And that would be awesome. Now, if I want to install a package, it's exactly what you say, install package. And technically, I could say which provider, and I could say Chocolatey. And then I could also say name Notepad++, but there's also a shortcut. If you just give no other arguments, you could just put in a package. So if we do kitty, it's going to use, unlike the Choco command, this is going to use NuGet, and it's going to go off and get that. And now if we say get package pipe grep kitty, kitty is installed. And if I want to remove the package, now the really cool thing about these commands, these are not just commands. You'll notice that it doesn't say Chocolatey install. It doesn't say install Chocolatey package. It says install package. It will go and use NuGet and say NuGet, go to any provider you've got and see if kitty is available. And if kitty is available, install it. And that is really cool because you can have multiple providers. This is, I think, the way of the future. Now I'm going to uninstall kitty. Boom. So if I want to play with a piece of software only temporarily, or I just need it for one task or job, I can go and deploy it. That was my original goal. And at the time, I was playing with R and Jupyter Notebooks and Python for data science. And I was looking through the repository, looking for all the things I would need. Find package, pandas, which is a data science processing thing. Did I type the command wrong? Type the command wrong. It says there is no package called pandas, which is weird because there is, but the idea is I started installing all of those things using Chocolatey. But here's the thing. When you're playing around with data science and you're doing software development tasks and automation, the first thing you discover is you need like 3 versions of Python, and then you follow instructions and say, oh, we'll create a private Python um, uh, personality locally, and that'll hold your libraries for one software development, and then you create another private one. But all of a sudden now I've got like I'm managing Python environments within my Windows, and you know what? I don't even want it there. I don't. I want my desktop applications there, and I'd rather be doing my Python and my data science and my DevOps in Linux. And the way I used to do that was with virtual machines. For the last, I can't, like 5-7 years, I've been using VMware Workstation and VMware ESX to create really robust labs. And in particular, recently, the last 3 years, a lot of adversary simulation or cyber ranges, if you like the military term. Been building tons of those, really elaborate, and I always did them with VMs. I was like, they take a lot of RAM and they hit the disk really hard, and I don't have a data center anymore. I've got a really robust computer with like 64 gig of RAM, but disk I/O is a bit of a problem. And containers, Docker containers, don't hit things as badly just in their idle state. So I thought, most of what I want in my simulations or in my experiments would be better just standalone, but it doesn't need the full everything of the OS. And that's literally what a Docker container is about. And in this case, I wasn't doing a lot of adversary simulation. I was doing a lot of data processing. So you take logs, you parse them. Maybe you got some Zeek or Bro logs. Maybe you got some DNS logs. I was fetching the top 1 million Alexa DNS names and getting all their MARC records and DMARC DKIM, and SPF records to analyze for errors. And I just wanted that in one contained thing, and that's Docker. So I gave up on installing everything with Chocolatey. I still use it as my package manager. If I want to install anything, I don't download the software. I don't click install. I do it through this package. What's really cool is they integrate it with VirusTotal. They also pre-vet the packages and they cache the packages. So there's an extra safety net there. Now, if I want to use Docker, that's also easy. And I'm going to switch over here. So there on the screen, bottom of the screen, is the link to Docker for Windows. Now, there's a couple things you got to know about Docker if you haven't used Docker for Windows. So if you're on the Linux side, it's the same thing. It's still the Docker engine. Everything, all the commands work, but installing it and making it work on your OS is different. You're going to need Docker Desktop for Windows, and you're going to need a Docker account. If you haven't used Docker before, basically, in order to fetch packages from repositories, you need to authenticate. So you get a Docker account. You don't have to pay anything for it, and that allows you to fetch packages. Otherwise, you're stuck with just the ones you build. And you're fetching them off a thing called Docker Hub. Now, when you install it, I've already got installed. There's not much of a GUI. So there's this GUI here that allows you to log in. It allows you to make this interact with, say, a Kubernetes environment, etc. So you can make your local Docker engine part of something bigger. It's not what I'm talking about This is strictly local. And importantly, it allows you to put restrictions on local resources. Now, my desktop computer is 64 gig of RAM, and I've literally given half of it to Docker. Never needed that much. Even for a project where I was spinning up 30 Docker containers, I didn't need it. And I give it half my CPUs. I've got like a 4-year-old i7, so I don't have a lot of cores. Like, I don't have these new cool AMD Ryzen things where I could have 16 or 32 cores. And I tell it, the thing you have to realize is that Docker for Windows is actually going to create a Hyper-V machine right here. And when you say give it a certain amount of RAM, that's how much RAM is given to this. And when you say how much disk space to give it here, it's going to go to that Hyper-V machine and say, well, that's the size of your image. The other thing you can do is say, do you want to share things? Now, I've done something very stupid, and I've basically said all my Docker containers have access to my C drive. Really, you'd probably want to restrict that. Now, once that's installed and once you're logged in, you've now got the ability to get Docker containers. And I don't know how many of you have actually done a lot of Docker work, so I'm just going to do a little tutorial on how this works. Let me go back over to my notes. Come on. Oh, yeah, let me just back up for 1 second. So there's a good news, bad news situation with Dockers for Windows. Bad news, if you previously used, say, VirtualBox or VMware Workstation. I heavily use that for 10 years now. I haven't renewed my license. I don't use it. Docker for desktop uses Hyper-V. So you got to remove VMware Workstation for Windows. If you're on Windows 10, you probably start, and if you're security minded, you probably already started to think, hey, how come I have to disable Credential Guard and Device Guard to make VMware Workstation for Windows work? Oh, that's not good. I want Credential Guard. That's a really good Windows security feature. Well, the bad news is you can't use VMware Workstation. The good news is you can now get, if you're using Docker, turn Credential Guard back on. When I publish these notes, I've actually put in how you would enable and disable Credential Guard the super easy way, not the bunch of registry hacks or PowerShell commands that you can't get the permissions for correctly. You use the Device Guard readiness tool, and it will turn on and off Credential Guard for you. Reboot, update your protected BIOS if your computer has a TPM. Once you get it installed, that's it. Now you can run Docker containers. And so let me show you a little bit about Docker. Docker doesn't have a GUI, as I said. It's all CLI. Why? For automation, you can automate all this stuff with PowerShell. You can automate this with Ansible, a lot of other DevOps tools. All the DevOps tools are all about automating things. So in the same way that I could script things with PowerShell to do my Choco installs, I can do that here too. The way Docker works is if you want to get an OS, okay, say I need Ubuntu. I say Docker pull. Let me make this again a little bigger, just so you can see. And so it went off to the cloud using NuGet, just like Choco did. And it goes and says, oh, there is a package called Ubuntu. The really cool thing about Docker is people make customized versions. And so you can come here and you'll find out if there's an official build. And you'll see a bunch of other people's variants of it. You cannot trust builds of containers from other people. It is better to go and get their Docker recipe and learn how to build those. But from certain official sources, it's no different than downloading an ISO and building a VM. So threat model, in my opinion, my threat model doesn't differentiate between downloading an ISO and trusting it in a VM versus getting the Docker container image from an official source. So for instance, say I want Kali Linux, and here's a great example. If I'm going to do a pen test or security assessment, if I need to gather a bunch of information off of a client's network or go threat hunting, Kali might be a go-to resource. Contains all the tools I want. And Docker search Kali Linux. Here's the official version. So now I can say Docker pull Kali Linux. Now this is a little different in that I have to specify the version I want because there are different ones. And now it's going to go off and you're going to see, boom, now I have it. Now it's not running. Now I've just pulled off the pre-built Docker container, and now I can make, or Docker image, now I can make multiple containers. Think of them like VMs, except they don't contain everything. They're smaller, they're contained. The idea is that you don't pull in anything you need until you need it. You want a full-blown Ubuntu, you can get that, but maybe what I want to do is just run one command. So let me pull up another example. Say what I really want to do is just run a bash shell real quick. Boom. See that? It did not, like, if I had to fire up an Ubuntu VM, that would take 30 seconds, maybe longer. This, that was done. And think about how long the pull command took. That was pulling down the image. And the image is smaller than the ISO because it's only going to take what it needs dynamically. So now here I am, and you'll notice the shell has got this random ID. It probably doesn't even have networking unless I give it that. So in the Docker command line, I can say, well, like, give me a network. So no one's hacking this. This is so much different than rolling out a VM, but I've got this. Now, I can do more than that. So say I want this to be persistent. Say what I really want to do is grep through some files, sort the contents, print out the output. Well, what I really want to do, oh, and let me just show you something. That container that I ran, the process is no longer running. As soon as all I said originally was run bin bash, and the minute I exited, it just killed the container. You can also keep them running. You can even deploy them as services so that when you start Windows, the container starts up and provides, say, a network service. What I want to show you is I'm going to do this persistently. The reason why my C drive is shared out, so insecurely, I'm going to access some files in my OneDrive. And inside my container, I'm going to put them in a folder called data. And then I'm going to say, you know what, let's run this in Ubuntu and ls data. What did I do wrong? Oh, got a command line argument. This, what you're seeing on the screen, is the contents of my documents folder. But that was within Ubuntu. And then the machine exited. So if what I really wanted to do was say rep/data, let's do this, resumes, what do I want to do here? Grep resumes, let's go CISM. It's lying to me. Well, clearly I'm doing something wrong because it's saying data resumes doesn't exist. Anyways, no demo ever goes 100% correct. But my point is, you can now use Unix tools on your Windows data. You could launch a service. So one of the things I do constantly right now is either work with what are called Kaggle kernels or Jupyter notebooks. These are interactive Python notebooks that are done through a web browser where you can run code, load data, but also write your notes. And so in data science, we would write up an experiment, put our assumptions in a notebook, but then we would write code to load the data, clean the data, manipulate the data, analyze the data, and then do some machine learning and print out our output. And that's all done with Jupyter notebooks. Those, I could run a VM, but I want a separate one for every experiment, and I want to load my data into that container, and I want to save it, and I don't want it to take up a lot. And so I can do that through Docker. So I can say Docker container run. Well, let's first make sure I have what I'm looking for. Pull. I've already got the latest Docker image for Kaggle, which is where I'm going to get my Jupyter notebook. And I'm going to say run this container, but I want you to map port 8888 in the container to port 8888 on my machine. So I'm going to launch something in that container, and it's going to listen on port 888, and then I'm going to connect to it on my machine, and Docker is going to redirect me. Don't worry about what these arguments mean. So I'm going to say I'm going to launch a Kaggle Python, but the command I want to run, Jupyter, and it's going to launch the notebook service. And I'm going to say, look, I don't have a desktop in this thing, so when you launch Jupyter Notebook, don't try to launch a browser in there because it's going to fail. And then I'm going to say allow access from any IP. And I'm going to say the notebook dir is /data. I'm going to go all the way back here. And just like before, I'm going to say, you know what? Go to users, Michael, drive, documents, map that to data. And then one final thing, this is just an idiosyncrasy of permissions for Kaggle. I have to say allow root in the container. Now this is going to fire up, and it's going to run that command called Jupyter space notebook. And what you're seeing is the output of that command within the container, and it says, hey, go here. And now I'm going to launch a browser. And it wants this token, which was in that window. So it's this token right here, which is really super long. Oh, did I just kill it? I hope not. Oh, I pasted the token twice. Here we go. This web application, Jupyter, is running in that container. If I go up to the top level of my files, you'll see this is my C drive directory that I specified. So I can save all my data from my Jupyter notebook in here. And if you're doing data science or you're doing threat hunting using data science methods, this is where you want to be. So I can suddenly create a new Python 3 Jupyter notebook, and I can say print hello world. Boom, and it runs my Python, and then I can go and say, well, you know what, save all this output. Or I can download it to my browser either way, and then I can come back here, and I can say, you know what, let's shut down this server, and it's done. Container's gone. I've done my experiment. I fetched all of my stuff, and that container had network access, so I could download data. It's a thing of beauty. With Kali, I can do some even more interesting things. So let's also say C users Michael OneDrive documents data Kali Linux Kali rolling, but need some networking. So we're going to go back here and say, you know what? Let's map port 222 to port 22. So port 2222 on my Windows machine will forward to port 22 inside the Jupyter Notebook. Now I'm on the command line. If I type exit, VM goes away. Go look at /data. There's all the stuff in my OneDrive. Now let's update apt update. So it says, okay, I can update these packages. Now let's install. What is the package name that contains the good old fashioned if config?
Should be net tools. Net
Is it?
dash tools.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Moro.
You're looking at a Unix Linux junkie.
I work in so many distros, I've totally forgotten package names.
I know. I recently started using OpenBSD. Oh, and it's like completely alien again. And I'm just like, apt. Nope, it's not apt. It's like package get, something like that. But
yeah, and you know what? In Ubuntu, they're replacing apt with something else.
What? Apt is so beautiful. You know, when I first saw apt, I was just like, oh, wow, this is so much easier than RPM, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that was before Yum kind of came on the scene and everyone started using Yum inside of Red Hat. So
I was a hard convert because I was an RPM package developer.
Oh, okay.
From way back. So like in 98, 99.
Oh, wow.
I was the first person to package GNU Lisp in an RPM package. It was really, really a tricky build. I packaged the Zircon IRC client, And I was packaging all these things that weren't native and then publishing them and maintaining them for the community. And then when Yum came out, and apt was like, that's the Debian thing. Red Hat's package is superior. Today, I after having gone through the horror of dealing with the Solaris package manager and Windows and Mac not having proper package managers, I love Choco, I love Nougat, and I love containers.
Sorry to interrupt. So I have a question actually from Ryan. He was actually asking, aside from group policy, what are some other ways to push, manage, or report update status for remote machines using Chocolatey? Does it require machines to be on the local LAN to manage?
Okay. So if you have the business version, I haven't played with it, but there are ways to get this done. But my go-to right now would be using the new Windows WinRM, which supports SSH as well as the traditional transport mechanisms, and supports all kinds of authentication mechanisms. Take your pick. If you're in a domain, you just have to tell each machine, well, trust machine X, server X, to allow Windows remote connections. And then you can execute PowerShell remotely, but you can also have PowerShell commands interact with those environments and just fetch data. So then you can create a PowerShell command that basically says, here's a list of computer names. Go and get the output of this command. And it's different than actually opening up a shell or a PowerShell and running the command. It's executing the code. And that's all enabled by WinRM. And forgive me, because I'm not a sysadmin every day. I only know what I've learned by having to build threat hunting and assessment environments. But I love the security behind WinRM. I love that there's a trust environment. I love that you can leverage newer, more modern authentication systems. And I love the fact that your machine, if it's on the network but not joined to a domain, you can just use a different authentication mechanism, even SSH, and go off and fetch that data. With PowerShell Core, now you can have PowerShell environments running on Linux machines and Macs, and then run PowerShell scripts to go out to them. It's not really relevant to Chocolatey because it's a Windows-only thing. So I don't have like the perfect answer to your question. The Chocolatey website does dive into that. My only point is there's a lot of ways to skin the cat here. There's a lot of ways to do it. And it doesn't have to be domain joined. The point is you've got a rich PowerShell framework in Chocolatey to do whatever you want in PowerShell. Ryan also says Kali is using IPA to replace ifconfig. Yeah, and here's the thing about the Docker container: the IP command is not here either. And I don't know. I don't remember the package name for this one either.
Yeah, honestly, it's all across the board, right? Ubuntu, Debian, they're all using that new the new network commands, right? So.
Yeah, and I've gotten quite used to using the new commands. The thing it's hard to get used to in Docker is they build very, very minimal images. Now, this is really cool because you know what the DevOps folks want this for is when they go and deploy an application, they want to deploy the application as what they call a continuous build process or continuous integration process. They don't want to deploy a VM for every copy of the web server and the web farm. That's what the container's for. Just the kernel, the minimum OS, the minimum libraries for their application, the minimum web server, database server, and the data it needs, all deployed. And so when we do something as security folks interactively and we're expecting every Kali Linux command to be there, it's like, oh, right, this is the Docker way. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. But say I want to use Metasploit. What did I want? MS5? What the heck's it called? App search. The package is probably just called it's Metasploit framework. App install. Now, see, normally in Kali, if you were to run that command, apt install Metasploit framework, it's not going to install that many packages because this is Docker. None of the stuff sits there by default. Now, think about this. We need to, as security professionals, encourage everyone in the world to start getting on this containerization. Now, actually, they're ahead of us. If you're a security person, you're probably years behind, like I am, in catching up with what DevOps is doing. But this means there's less attack surface. It's great. I'm not going to say yes to this, but the point is I could go and then run all sorts of commands, but I have access to where my data is. And when I'm done, say I did a Metasploit, like I like to take Metasploit framework and then use DB Nmap to do all my Nmap scans. It saves them in the Metasploit database, but then I will export everything as CSV, grab my evidence, grab my loot, and then save it for my report. Well, I can do that. I can just put it in the data folder, and then when I'm done, the whole environment's gone. I don't need to keep the environment up to date. The environment will be up to date. The one final thing I want to show is something cool that I just started working on. So one of the things I've been working on is a lot of elk stack stuff. I won't show you that running because it's just not different than Kaggle containers. But I've been working on some analytic stuff. It might be with Elasticsearch and Kibana, loading some stuff with Logstash. In one case, I have my own scripts that go out and do millions of DNS requests and save the data in JSON format, then take that JSON data and put it into Elasticsearch and update Kibana indexes. If you don't know what that is, it's an analytics platform like Splunk or Power BI. And I want to have a container that starts up, has a bunch of scripts that I have and some data files of my own, and then launches a process and starts doing all these DNS lookups. And when it's done, loads the data, and then the container disappears. Well, how would I do that without interaction? In the examples I just showed you, I'd have to say Docker container run, Ubuntu, then run my scripts. Well, I could put script in the command line, but how do I get my data into a container? Well, I could do it through that volume mount, but I really don't want to do that. I don't want to have this thing that's running have access to my C drive all the time. And I might actually want to run it off in the cloud. I might run it in Azure or DigitalOcean. Now, this is where this part comes in. You can build and run a Docker container from a GitHub repository. So you can basically take the instructions for creating the new container, and it basically looks like a text file that says, hey, the base of this is Ubuntu, so go get the Ubuntu image. But let's have some data in my GitHub repository and my scripts in my GitHub repository, and let's build a new container based on Ubuntu that includes my data, includes my scripts, but then has a whole bunch of commands all in that Docker build file. Says, okay, go and get the Ubuntu image, put in my scripts, put in my data, and then run the script. When that's done, export it or load it into Elasticsearch. So I can have another Docker container already running with Elasticsearch. It puts it in there. I can even have a Docker file that builds both things as part of the build. And then when the script is complete, it just exits. And for me, doing, say, threat intelligence gathering, where I want to go out and have a very long running process that scans and gathers a lot of data, kind of breaks it down cleans up the data, does some analysis on it, and loads it into a searchable database. I want to be able to run that whenever I want, maybe with some parameters. Go investigate the following list of domains. I don't have to have a VM dedicated to that. I can put all of those instructions in my GitHub repository. So here's an example for this project, DMARC Analyze. And this isn't done yet, but this thing would go off and start up a Debian container, update it to the latest software, use the Python pip command to install this check DMARC software, make my project directory, include my scripts, which are in my GitHub repository, get my data, which is in my GitHub repository, expose the SSH port in case I need to interact with it, then go off, gather the data, and put it in Elasticsearch, exit, and it's gone. And the only command I have to run is docker build and put in the GitHub repository string, then docker run. All from my desktop, all automated. That's amazing to me. I don't have anything else to show and tell, but I am now paying attention to the chat window if anyone has questions. Gonna hide that. Gonna hide that. Well, if there are no questions, Mauro, you got any commentary to add?
No, I thought that was actually really really informational. As I was replying to Derek on the YouTube channel there, I have done automation stuff. I've played with Ansible. There's certainly things in my job where we're actually delivering some training that require some scripting and automation as well. But yeah, in terms of containers, using it in the way that you've demonstrated, I wasn't really, never really thought of it in that way. I mean, I know that you can containerize applications for delivery in certain instances. I know there's a very cool video actually on Chick-fil-A and how they were using Kubernetes containers to essentially push out their POS and their systems for their individual stores. And man, they scaled the heck out of it. And it was just a very, very cool talk by the guys that had designed the platform, or I shouldn't say the platform, but just the overall environment for Chick-fil-A. And I mean, that just opens up a whole can of worms in terms of just the I guess the number of alternatives and things that you can do with containers. So very cool, I thought. And I agree with your comments that you made that as security analysts, as sysadmins, in a world where security is coming to the forefront, we really do need to design solutions where we can reduce that attack surface. And one way is to absolutely strip out, libraries, various things that, just make it easier for an attacker to really get into your system, right? So, we were talking about that before the broadcast about the idea of, operating systems, minimal operating systems that, don't have a full-blown kernel in it anymore. They're just designed to do a specific task. And I think that, going into the future in that, we have to take that strategy really to kind of, I guess, thin the herd, if you want to call it. I think there's a lot of hackers out there that are really not hackers. They're script kiddies. And the people that are talented, well, quite frankly, they're going to figure out how to attack you, even if you are in a container or not. But, as far as sort of, reducing the basically pay to hack mentality and getting rid of those script kiddies and, overall getting rid of, I don't know what you want to call it. I think a lot of low-lying attackers. I think this is a very good strategy. So,
I think another thing is, um, I think DevOps is arriving to uh, IT security late.
Yes.
And a great example of that is, the vast majority of security tools I've worked with, not the open source stuff, but like the wonderful automated, impressive stuff. It's mostly Linux, but it's all based on VMs and it's not containerized, and a lot of it could be. And Docker does have an infrastructure where you can have access to private repositories, commercial repositories through a marketplace. And I'm not going to mention brand names here, but I can think of stuff I've used in auditing firewalls, things I've used in managing tools, things I've used for um, enumerating software and network stuff. And it's all just Linux. When I go to upgrade it, I log in. Some SIMs. I'd rather have those as Docker containers. And I don't know. From a product management perspective, I'm sure it proposes some challenges to the vendors, not just in terms of development and investment, but in terms of if we put this in a Docker container, does that mean our customers can compose new Dockers on top of it? And is that bad for us? And honestly, that's why I want it. I want to compose my own Docker containers that take their Docker container and then say, oh, but I want to fire up my network configuration risk management tool that goes out and scans all of my firewall switches, network appliances, grabs their configs and checks them. I want to do that as a container. I want to fire it up. I don't want it running as a service all the time. And I want it to export its data. And maybe I want to combine it with some other stuff. So I'm going to compose a new Docker container that has theirs inside of it as the base, but has my own stuff. Most of the vendors tend to harden their underlying OS, so maybe based on Red Hat or CentOS or something. But so I think there's a bigger challenge, but I really think over time we should, as customers, when we sit down and we're talking to vendors, to say, hey, when's there going to be a Docker, just so they know, because they don't, unless we ask, no one's going to say, oh, was that even a thing? Is it good in our market? Should we try? What's it going to cost?
But that's the thing, right? I mean, they should. And maybe this is not quite the same thing, but when you look at like the open source movement, and the way like the Open Source Foundation, how they allow applications to be shared. I mean, nothing stops a person from modifying the application to fit their needs. So I don't see how that would be really any different. And I think it really just helps innovate the technology further. More importantly, when you have an entire community trying to do something for, I guess, the greater good of the app, the application or whatever, you just generally you're going to get more adoption, right? People are going to say, "Oh, that's useful. Why am I not doing that already?" And thank God this customer took this Docker container and then built something else on top of it. It's like, oh, great, now we've got another use case. And more importantly, it's like, can we charge support for it? which is the truth, right? I mean, you look at Red Hat. I mean, that's their financial model. It's like, they give away CentOS for free, essentially. I mean, granted, it's a separate organization. I get it, but essentially, nothing stops anyone from using CentOS. But if it's an enterprise organization and they want support, they're not going to use CentOS. They're going to go to Red Hat and use Red Hat support. So I don't see how that would be any different for any private company to say, okay, yeah, let's Dockerize it, and here you go, customer, you can do whatever you want with it, and if you want support, this is the cost of support. So
okay, I'm going to start to wrap it up because we've been going for an hour, and you know me, I'll talk all night.
Absolutely.
I do, for our audience at home, those live right now and those who will watch this later, couple questions. So first of all, feel free to put more questions in the comments. I'll monitor them and I'll answer them separately. After this is over, I'm going to write up all those notes you saw. I'm going to put those in a LinkedIn article, so you've got access to all that. And I'm going to put those in the comments. So come back, check that out. I don't intend to stop doing these because, as Mauro pointed out when we started, I'm a little addicted to this right now. I have 5 years of catching up on sharing things I've learned, and there's just tons of it. And it's easier to live stream than it is to put together a presentation. And I love show and tell. If there's something that you're interested in, especially my friends, I know you always have some question. And when I say I've done some weird thing and I think, oh, everyone's doing that, and you tell me, no, but please share. Let me know. Either hit me up on LinkedIn, tell me what you're interested in, or put it in the comments, and I will be happy to do that. If you haven't subscribed to the Cybersecurity Librarian on YouTube, please do. That helps me get a URL that says YouTube/Cybersecurity Librarian instead of the random 32-character URL. And I would greatly appreciate it. Until then.
And remember, smash that like button if you like that. If you like this video, it just helps other people find it. So
this is true. Subscribing helps me. Hitting the like button helps other people find this thing.
Absolutely.
And here is the outro music.
Right. See everyone.
See ya.